Good afternoon, Mayor Dyer, Vice Mayor Wilson, members of the council, Mr. Toni. I'm very happy to be here today to present to you the proposed FY23 flood protection program. I'm going to begin by giving you an overview of the program, followed by the creation of the master projects within the program. I'm going to touch on the standalone projects, accomplishments, and some challenges we are facing. So this is how the flood protection program is funded. As you can see, the bond referendum comprises most of that funding at over 76%, followed by appropriations to date of local funding at 21.5%. The other small pots of money include flood protection pay-as-you-go at $5.5 million, the federal funding at $8.1 million. That's FEMA reimbursement funds we received several years ago. And then the state funding of $4.1 million includes grant funding from the state's Community Flood Preparedness Fund. So the program has a total of $757.1 million for 41 projects. So the flood protection program is a new standalone CIP this year. If you recall, in the past, the flood control section was included in the stormwater CIP with operations and maintenance and stormwater regulatory. So we are now a standalone CIP. As I said, there are 41 total projects. We have created 7 master projects that contain 30 projects within those master projects. The idea behind the master projects is they have companion projects that are associated with each one of those master projects. And all of the appropriations to date within the companion projects can be transferred with city manager approval between projects in order for us to advance these projects more quickly. All transfers will be reported to the Flood Control Community Oversight Board monthly. We also have 11 standalone projects and programs that are programmed at over $102 million included in the flood protection program. So now I want to talk a little bit more detail about the master projects. The first one is the Central Resort District. It includes these 3 projects. You can see the appropriations to date on each of those projects. These are the 3 projects that will be constructed together. The bounding area for the Central Resort District includes Laskin Road to the north, Atlantic Avenue to the east, 17th Street to the south, and Birdneck Road to the west. These projects are still in the planning stages, and as I said, they will be constructed together. The next master project is Eastern Shore Drive Phase 1. It includes these 8 companion projects. Total appropriations to date for this master project is $34 million. These are all of the projects within the master project. We will be constructing 4 new pump stations, side street drainage improvements along the north side of Shore Drive, and side street drainage improvements along the Cape Henry Drive. We'll also be elevating Lynnhaven Drive at the intersection of West Great Neck Road and Lynnhaven Drive. We did submit an application for the BRIC grant, which is the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities grant. That grant would design and construct the Lynnhaven Colony Park Pump Station, the Cape Henry Canal Phase 2, the Lynnhaven Drive Pump Station, and elevate Lynnhaven Drive. If we are successful in obtaining that funding, all 4 of those projects would be constructed together. However, if we're not, the plan is to design and construct Lynnhaven Colony Park Pump Station, Lynnhaven Drive Pump Station, and Cape Henry Canal project together. The rest of the projects in this master project will be designed and constructed separately. The Green Infrastructure Master Project includes these 2 sub-projects, and the appropriations to date for this master project is $40 million. The first sub-project, the marsh restoration in Back Bay, This is where we are constructing marsh terraces within Bonnie Cove. The rendering you see on the presentation, the one on the left, is what the area looks like today, and the rendering to the right would be what it would look like after the marsh terraces are constructed. We did submit an application for the state's Community Flood Preparedness Fund to help us fund the construction. We submitted the grant application for $5 million. The Elizabeth River Wetland and Floodplain Restoration Project. This project received a grant from the state for $3 million from the Community Flood Preparedness Fund. We are just starting the design of this project, and it includes wetland restoration and living shorelines in the two areas you see here. Lake Bradford Chubb Lake Master Project includes these three projects with appropriations to date at $119.5 million. The first project, Lake Bradford Chubb Lake, was the original parent project of this program. It includes these two sub-projects. The first, the Lake Pleasure House Outfall, will begin construction this summer. It is estimated to be complete by spring of next year. The Lake Bradford Dredging Project will be advertised in a couple months. The construction start date expected in the late summer and completed by the end of 2023. The Chubb Lake, Lake Bradford Pump Station Outfall has not started. We are in the process of doing the pump station location study for this project. The plan at this point is to have this project be a design, build, delivery. And the Church Point Thurgood BMP and Conveyance Improvements Project will be a standalone design, bid, build project. The Linkhorn Bay Drainage Basin Master Project includes these two projects. Appropriations to date are $6.7 million. The first project, the First Colonial Road and Oceana Boulevard Drainage Improvements Project, we submitted a Community Flood Preparedness Fund application from the state for $1.8 million for this project. We just submitted it last week for the round 3 funding. The design for this project has not started. The SeaTac Neighborhood Drainage Improvements Project, we were awarded a Community Flood Preparedness grant from the state for $1.9 million, and we are just scoping the design for this project. The Princess Anne Plaza Lakes and Windsor Woods Master Project includes these 10 projects with over $266 million appropriated to date. The first project that will be constructed within Princess Anne Plaza is the Bow Creek Stormwater Park. Right now, we are currently at approximately 60% design on phase 1. The next project, the North London Bridge Creek Tidegate Pump Station and Barriers Project, and the 3 projects in the lakes, the Holland Road Gate, the flood barriers, South London Bridge Creek Channels and Gate. All 3 of those projects will be included as part of one design build contract. In addition, in Windsor Woods, the Pump Station Project, the Flood Barriers Project, and the Thalia Creek Lake Trashmore Improvements Project will also be included in that one design build contract. Also in Windsor Woods, we have these 3 neighborhood pipe projects. The first one, Clubhouse Road, is currently under construction. It is expected to be complete this August. The South Plaza Trail Presidential Boulevard Drainage Improvements Project will begin construction in June, and we estimate construction to be complete by summer of 2024. And the Old Forge, Red Lion, Old Forge Court project will begin construction early next year and be complete by late 2024. The Southern Rivers Master Project includes these 3 projects with a total of $88.5 million appropriated to date. All 3 of these projects are currently in the planning stages. For Pungo Ferry Road, We will be raising Pungo Ferry west of the bridge all the way to Blackwater Road. That project, the delivery method is still to be determined. The Sandbridge-Newbridge intersection improvement project, also still in the planning stages. This project will raise the intersection and add a large box culvert under Newbridge Road. And then the Westnet Creek Bridge project, this is a very large project. We are also still in the planning stages for this project, and the design and construction method is still being determined. So the standalone projects in the flood protection program include these 11 projects and programs. You can see the appropriations to date for each of those. I'm not going to go into detail on these. These have been in our program for a while now. Moving on to the accomplishments. We completed construction on 3 projects in the last year. The 50th Street Drainage Improvements Project, the Cape Henry Canal Phase 1 project, the Aragona Drainage Improvements Project, and we have completed the master plan for the Upper Westnet Creek Drainage Basin. So I'll close today with some challenges. Now, the first 2 you see here, you will probably hear the rest of this afternoon. Obviously, escalating costs and inflation are a concern moving our program forward, as well as supply chain disruption and material sourcing issues. We've already experienced a delay on one of our projects in construction because of materials. And the last one, the previous absence of state and federal assistance. I'm happy to say we were chosen to be in the Army Corps of Engineers work plan for the Coastal Storm Risk Management Study. So that will put us in the queue to have federal funding on our projects once those projects have been identified after their study is complete. And then with the state funding, we have been successful in getting Community Flood Preparedness Fund grant funding for several of our projects, but the future of that funding is still unknown, so we don't know of any future state funding sources for our projects. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions? Toni, I noticed one thing. It seems that projects are pretty well distributed throughout the city.
Yes, I would agree. The 7 master projects are distributed in equal areas without the city, yes.
Yeah, and, I think that's important to realize, going forward that, we're not, zeroing in one area, I think when we had the bond referendum, we wanted explicit this was going to be a tangible benefit to the entire city. So, I just want to applaud you. Mr. Bellucci.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Toni. How
Hi.
are you? It's nice to see you.
Good.
Thank you for your presentation. I just have a question in terms of the CIPs as it's recommended in formulation. How much of the element of risk to neighborhoods and to communities did you formulate in your recommendations? And in other words, if there's a higher likelihood that a neighborhood could flood or will flood, did that priority enter into your frame of thinking when you made these recommendations for how these projects should be funded? In other words, sequentially.
Yes, so actually, the original projects from the bond referendum were projects that were already underway that still needed funding. So, for example, Windsor Woods, Prince Anne Plaza, and the Lakes, the area that experienced some of the worst flooding after Matthew, were high priority projects. In fact, they were one of the 6 projects that were originally proposed in the CIP back in FY2017 when the first infusion of funding came into the CIP. So the projects that were already underway obviously had the priority just because we were already moving ahead with those. So those priorities were based on neighborhoods that had flooded previously.
I thank you for that, and I think it's incredibly important that we maintain that priority because flooding is a real risk for all parts of our city, and I do think it's important, as the mayor pointed out, that the flood control projects are distributed geographically, and yet the neighborhoods that I have the privilege to represent, they can't afford to wait any longer, and so I'm grateful for that prioritization that you've implemented, and I'm really interested in ensuring that that schedule is preserved in the budget that we approved this May. Thank you very much.
Barbara.
y'all probably have this really nice list of projects that have been completed over the last, well, I think with Matthew, we've had a certain list of projects that came out of Matthew because those were the projects that were brought to our attention from that particular storm.
Right.
However, if it had come at a different angle or something, we probably would have had other neighborhoods that would have been on that list. But anyway, we've had this basic list throughout that time. But I know that some of them have been completed, and then I think we had some before that. But could you kind of give us a list of what has been completed? Because I think there's a perception that we really haven't been doing anything. Of course, a lot of it with these projects, it takes a long time to do the design and all of that work that has to be done before you can actually go to construction.
We actually have a pretty exhaustive list that we provided, I believe, last year in the Friday package, and we can certainly provide that to you again. I mean, it was pages of what we have done, because as you mentioned, a lot of the studies had to be done, and we did a lot of those as part of the sea level rise adaptation strategy, just to push us forward with some other projects. And then the master planning has also identified some additional projects. But we've been working since 2017, once we got that first infusion of funding, continuously getting to where we are now. And now that we have this funding to move forward to implement some of these projects, they're going to move a lot faster. I mean, just in the last year, we went to advertise for construction 4 projects between November and January. So you'll see more construction going on this year than you have previously.
And then to just address that part of the city, the southern part of the city, which is so difficult to address from storming. And of course, we're coming into that season when we're going to be seeing the southwest winds, and we're going to hope it doesn't do what it does sometimes, and that is flood us without any rain. And it's the difference in the topography and the whole hydrology of the city is just phenomenal between the north and the south.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's why you don't see very many projects in the southern watersheds, because it's a whole different thing. But I really appreciate that we do have something. Of course, 2 of them are road projects that are not going to stop the flooding, but it will at least keep the roads from flooding, and that's Punga Ferry and Newbridge and Sandbridge. But then the other 2 just have some promise of doing something. And I just am so appreciative that we have that marsh restoration project, which of course this is a pilot, but because y'all were so good to continue the study for another year beyond the initial study to see if there was anything that we could do to try to help with what happens with the water coming up from the Albemarle. And so the fact that the staff was proactive and already had a opportunity to get some grant money to do some design for that project means that it should be under construction next year at this time. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
That will be, and if it works, then we've got another couple of thousand acres of marsh that we could do the same thing to. But of course, the idea is to slow the water down. It's not going to help with the getting rid of it, because that we can't do at this point. But if we slow it down, maybe the wind will shift and it will not do its dastardly deeds. But that whole area just is so different. But then the West Neck Creek, I think, and I really appreciate that being in the bond referendum, even though that was a sea level rise project. But I think that has some promise as well. And I realized with that being a big project and one that had not been anticipated, I think that was one that takes up the full 10 years.
It does, and we need to start, we're going to have to start with a preliminary engineering analysis because we're at just concept level at this point.
But that should have a big impact on the center part of the city that is around West Neck Creek, even all the way up to Ship's Corner Road. So, but the southern part, I wish we could do something as far as pump stations and so forth and say, well, now this community is much more protected. Where we are, we don't have that luxury, and it depends a lot on the wind. So we'll just hope we have a very mild spring and the wind doesn't blow very hard and we get past another spring without the flooding, but if it's going to do it, it's going to do it now. So watch out. But thank you a lot. Y'all have done a great job.
Thank you.
Now, anybody else? Okay, Rosemary and then Linwood.
So I understand y'all are working on signage to get out to where these projects are, so any idea when we might be seeing signs pop up?
Yes, ma'am. So we have created, I should say, the communications department has created a very nice ripple effect sign for our projects. You'll see the first sign go up at one of our projects that's currently under construction, the Clubhouse Road project. There is already a construction sign out there because they go out as soon as the project, when the contractor mobilizes, that's part of their contract, is to put out the sign. We're going to install a second sign with that project, and then we have two more projects, the Eastern Shore Drive, Cape Henry Canal, where we're relocating the gravity sewer. There will be a sign, the ripple effect sign at that project, as well as the dredging project in Lake Bradford outfall project will also have a ripple effect sign, and you will see those up in the next couple months. Those two projects were advertised for construction. January was the Eastern Shore Drive project, and November was the outfall project. So NTP for those projects is in the next couple months, and as soon as those projects mobilize, you'll see those construction signs go up.
I think it's great that you're going to use the same logo for what the bond referendum was, so that will help remind people that their vote really did matter, and they'll be able to see the results of their tax dollars and what their voting did. So wherever we can, having some of these projects, even though we're not totally ready to start shoveling dirt or whatever, I think it's good for people to know where they're going to be and that they're coming.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
coming soon to a neighborhood near you, type of thing. So I'm really excited about getting the signage out. Thank you.
And
Councilmember,
Linwood? Oh, yes.
sorry, Mayor, I wanted to respond to Vice Mayor. And just from a follow-up from our conversation previously, Vice Mayor, we are working to identify those operation projects where council did plus up an additional $45 or so billion of American Rescue Plan Act money to put out some signage on that as well, because that is a part of our overall flood protection program. So we do want to let the public know as well that that's a part of the flood protection program as well. So those should be going out at a sooner pace than the capital improvement projects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Tony, I just want to make sure I'm relaying this information correctly when I speak. So the 7 umbrella master projects, they are grouped together because they all drain to the same watershed. Is that how the master projects are grouped?
No, sir. So during the bond referendum, there were 6 areas identified. There's a 7th one because originally green infrastructure was included in the Southern Rivers area. We have since pulled that out since we have sub-projects. So it's still the 6 areas that were identified in the bond referendum, but it doesn't, they were all over the city. They don't just drain to one watershed. So we've got some in the Lynnhaven, we've got the living shorelines in the Elizabeth River. So they're not just one watershed. They're just companion projects that are related to that master project. So the Eastern Shore Drive projects, all of those are grouped together. All of the Windsor Woods, Prince and Pleasant Lakes projects together. So there was a theme that we had presented during the bond referendum, and we just continued and brought in those companion projects with them.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else at this point? Yeah.
We received a letter from one of the delegates, and apparently went to a civic league about water levels at Lake Bradford. I'm assuming that the low water level in Lake Bradford has something to do with the flooding project, drainage project, and so forth. Do you know?
We haven't started the project in Lake Bradford yet, so I'm not sure what letter you're referring to.
Yeah, so Councilmember Jones, I got the email from you and Mr. Moss yesterday. I have Deborah from my office who's reaching out to the delegate's office to get a copy of the letter so we can circulate it amongst staff and get a better sense of what's going on. As soon as we find out what he's asking for, staff will, as quickly as possible, respond to him. And we'll also share the information with council before we respond to the delegate's office as well, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Guy?
Can I just ask a question on this very point? Are you saying, Mr. Manager, that you only have become aware of this letter in the last day or two or so?
Yeah, I don't recall having a copy of that letter.
We've had it for a while. It brings up a point that's kind of occurred to me before. Mail to council. I hope we can find a way that it doesn't depend on one of us to forward mail, particularly from a member of the legislature, to council. I certainly would have done it if it just didn't occur to me that it wouldn't come to your attention and get handled in the normal course. I just put that out there as something I think council needs to address about if we're of whose responsibility is it when there is mail to all of council to make sure that the manager's office is as aware of it as we are, and in the same way. I'm not in any way commenting on this particular letter. It just brings up an issue that I've had in the past about mail to council not getting to your desk for response as well.
Okay, Barbara.
If I might just make another comment, I really appreciate the great job you folks do in identifying grants from these other sources that will help us, because we all know that we're probably not going to have enough, particularly with the inflation and so forth, to cover all of this. But these grants, that as they become available, and y'all have always done a good job, but you're really doing a good job now in identifying those opportunities, and we really appreciate that. It's whoever in Public Works does such a good job. I know I look at Phil Pullen and know that he stays on top of the funding for everything, and all of you do, and that's so important, particularly as we hear these other levels of government talking about wanting to help with infrastructure and so forth. So I hope that can be a continuing source, particularly with that marsh restoration. I think we've got a great opportunity with the Federal Wildlife Refuge in that area. And as well as North Carolina, we really have so many opportunities there to partner and to leverage. But that's going to be so important. I really appreciate the job y'all do.
And we actually are going to be submitting another NIFWIF grant to help with the construction of the marsh restoration, and that's coming up in the next couple months.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Okay. All right, anyone else? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, moving on.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, at this time, we'll do the next presentation as part of the flood protection stormwater CIP, which will be operations. For Tom, you going? You going now? We're doing operations now. Yes, sir.
We're ready to go to.
Hey, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Milliken. I'll be presenting along with my colleague Mark Jones with the stormwater management brief. We can go to the next one.
Oh, you got the clicker right there.
I got a clicker.
All right.
Thank you.
Sir.
I wasn't sure who had it.
All right.
There we are. Thank you. I'll kick us off with a brief funding overview and then discuss the water quality regulatory section, and then I'll turn it over to Mark for the operations and maintenance section. Okay, so funding with the remainder of our stormwater management program is split approximately 70-30 between the maintenance and water quality regulatory sections, with a total 6-year program funding of $166 million, covering 35 projects and programs. So I'll dig further into the water quality regulatory section. There we are. We have 5 projects requested at target. All 5 have been presented in the past. 4 of these projects are enhancements to existing lakes, which add features such as forebays and wetlands for added water quality improvements. The 5th project at the bottom of the table is the Lynnhaven River Basin Ecosystem Restoration Project. That's a tongue twister. It gets me every single time. This is a commitment to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers through a cost participation agreement. The project had a lot of really good things happen this year I want to touch on at the end of this. The majority of our regulatory section is programmatic in nature. Most of these programs are driven by TMDL requirements, which are like a pollution diet for our lakes, streams, and rivers. These TMDLs are applied throughout the city, and we have developed 5 of our programs to focus on water quality improvements in different watersheds within the city. Watershed-based programs may fund smaller water quality improvement projects. Projects that are more than $1 million, we split out into the standalone. If we can cover it with less than that, we keep it in these watershed programs. Another programmatic CIP of note is the Surface Water Regulatory Compliance Program, which funds many of the essential programs required by the city's MS4 permit, addressed each year in our annual report to DEQ. It's always worth me bringing this one up because this program includes inspections and audits by DEQ and EPA every 5 years. If either agency finds noncompliance, they can issue a fine of up to $32,500 per day per occurrence. So doing the math, that adds up to $12 million per year per occurrence, assuming we only have one occurrence. So it's a very important program. Okay, I want to get back to that accomplishment with the tongue twister project that I'm not going to try it again. This project achieved outstanding progress this year. The project overall supports Chesapeake Bay and Lynnhaven River restoration efforts. This is an example of a successful partnership between the City of Virginia Beach and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and also great coordination within multiple city departments. The city participates in a cost-share agreement with the Corps to contribute $14.5 million of the $40 million total cost. Phase 1 of the project completed construction in both the oyster reef habitat and the wetland restoration at Princess Anne High School. The oyster reef completed this year, almost a year ahead of schedule, at a significantly lower cost. It installed those little oyster balls, the concrete structures that oysters can grow on and help clean our river water. I was going to bring one in. I couldn't figure out all of the logistics to do it, but it's a very great show and tell. If anybody wants to see one, I think it's really cool, so I get excited about that. The wetland restoration has also been a great success, partnering with schools on the location. Students at City of Virginia Beach Public Schools helped to plant a section of the wetlands this year, and next already happened, the Corps of Engineers held a workshop with teachers on how they can take classes out there and teach both classes and also perform important monitoring duties for the long-term health of this wetland. So we're very proud of our Virginia Beach students for the great work they are doing and continue to do to improve the city's water quality. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mark.
Welcome.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, Mr. Manager, can't forget the City Attorney's Office. We do a lot of work together. I'd like to talk about the operations side of the house and take a look at programs, projects with no change. And starting with those three, we have 42nd Street, Arctic Avenue. Those projects have wrapped up, and the only one we have left that's just wrapping up now is Pinewood Road, which is out on the Little Neck. We've got a couple weeks left wrapping up that project. I have a future slide showing some photos of that. That was a really cool project with multiple contractors. Had a few challenges, but it turned out really well. Looking at O&M projects with no change, FY2023, totaling about just under 18 million, 17.89 to be exact. Looking at new projects, we have two. You're familiar with the ARPA for the federal funding for the American Recovery Plan for both the dredging, for the rehab and for the dredging. The first up to bat is the Enhanced Neighborhood Rehabilitation Program. So as you're aware, it was to add funding for $23.58 million for to adjust rehabilitation efforts. We've currently have 9 of 16 neighborhoods under design and scoping for construction. Under the total cost, as mentioned, $23.5 million. Our funding obligation deadline is December 31st, 2024, and then we have to finish construction by 2026, end of year 2026, and we are currently on track to do so. Next up is lake management. Same project, same type thing, to add $21.3 million to our dredging program. We're currently 14 lakes under design. That'll be done in a bid package type grouping of a few lakes each. Same thing. Funding obligation deadline will be 2024, construction 2026. And you've seen a couple of photos here. This is Glenwood 7, which is currently under construction, not using ARPA dollars, but since we don't have an ARPA lake under construction, I thought I'd show you a typical lake, what it'll look like, just like a normal lake under construction. This is one in Glenwood under the capital side, under 100-232 CIP. Moving on to accomplishments. The first one is Site 18 out in the southern watershed. This is a before and after looking from Pleasant Ridge Road. This was approximately just under 4,000 cubic yards of material removed. Total cost was just under $1.4 million. We completed this in January of this year. Next up was Site 15 on the other side of Beggar's Bridge between Pleasant Ridge and Charity Neck, which is on the other side of the Beggar's Bridge Reach. And it was approximately 3,200 cubic yards, was just under $2 million total construction and design cost, and was completed just last month. And next is Pinewood Road, which I mentioned earlier, which will be wrapping up, should be wrapping up by the end of this month. Total cost was just a hair over $2 million. Between two contractors, and you can see some construction photos there of the new double box culvert and the sheeting with construction in place. And we have another dredging project, Stratford 3, which was it wasn't a high cost project, but it was an exceptionally challenging project with all the administration, hold harmless agreements, the real estate, city attorney's office. It was a big win for us, and a big shout out to them for helping us overcome a lot of significant challenges with that project. And so we wrapped that up in that whole lake system in February, and that was a big win for the residents out there because it tied in to several other capital projects, so we were pretty glad to wrap that up. And then lastly, a rehab project, Brigadoon Christopher, it's about 27,000 linear feet of pipe. It was a little over $1 million, and it's estimated to be complete in May. We're just wrapping up the construction. Photos here of a typical lining operation. This is what you'll see typically too for ARPA. You'll see this all over the city and spread out in all the different districts that you represent. And construction lining and for the pipes that we line and repair to extend the life of them for the next generations to come. And then lastly, can't have a successful program without challenges, because it all doesn't go perfect. So as with the flood control program, overall construction cost increases, we're seeing it in the maintenance side of the house as well, and funding for current and future maintenance requirements. And we'll continue those efforts as best we can with the American Rescue Plan. And we're working as best we can with what we have on the maintenance cycle and backlogs to satisfy the residents. But we get new requests every day, and we're working on the ones that we have. Increase and keep pushing those neighborhood rehabilitation efforts because the residents do like to see that production in the neighborhood to return into that to that current rain event, rain to the drain type maintenance cycle, and then expand canal and roadside ditch maintenance the best we can as funding allows. And with that, I will turn it over to any questions you may have.
Rocky.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if you go back to slide 21, I just had a question about that, that Stratford Chase.
Yes, sir.
That, there it is. That, dredge right there with that crane on it, is that sitting on planet Earth or is it sitting on water? What is it?
That is floating on a barge, and that is actually getting ready to float.
Okay.
That actually sitting on,
So I can't tell, is it water underneath that or is it just soil from the earth?
that is actually right at the entrance to the lake, getting ready to be launched.
Okay, and then that's that's the same shot.
Yes,
after-
sir. That's what it looks like now. If you go out there now, that's what Stratford looks like now. Yes,
So they
sir.
floated that in there,
Yes, sir.
at top of, okay.
Yes, sir. And then they float it, and then they go through the canal, and then they do the center channel to dredge to plan, and then they put it in a dump bucket to drain, and then haul it out by truck out to the
Okay.
pit.
All right, well, thank you. I didn't know if it was a wheeled vehicle that was driving in there, because on this picture, it almost looks like it's soil that is driving on.
Now, we build a construction entrance that's, per plan, where we have easement access, and then we bring in our construction equipment, and then we put it on a barge, and then we float it out through the access way.
Nice.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And that's where the encroachments and all that come into play, because a lot of these waterways are very narrow, and people build these elaborate, because they consider it waterfront property, and so they get kind of extravagant with their docks and sheds and bars and everything that they want to build on their little waterway.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Anything else?
My favorite project.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to ask you about.
Hit me with it. Yes, ma'am.
Lead ditch, right. I just want to compliment the contractor that did this Site 18. They really did a good job, much better than the previous contractor who had done other projects for this overall.
Okay.
And I still would love to walk that, but before the cottonmouths get real active.
Yes, ma'am.
And the Site 15 was the other side. I never really saw it come out. So
Well, it's done. Yes, ma'am. It's complete.
all the way from Pleasant
The ridge down to Charity Neck.
Neck.
Yes, ma'am. And the entrance is at Dolly. That's the entrance is at Dolly, I believe, right? Or is that side 18?
Well, where the dolly came in. But anyway,
Right.
I'm very familiar with that area. 'Cause
I know you are. Yes,
rode
ma'am.
out there many a time.
That's
in
your
the
old
day.
stomping ground since the 70s. I was there for your history lesson,
Oh, okay.
right?
But this project, now that you've done the Beggar's Bridge projects, I mean, this is the one that everybody depends on. So will y'all be moving now down to Nanny's Creek or some of the other watershed areas?
Yes,
How
ma'am.
are
That's
you
the
going to do
plan.
that?
Actually, we've got Site 11 in purchasing, waiting to bid. That's already been designed. And we also are working on, we took that 99 report, that PB&J
Right.
report. We took that and I'm not going to go into all the details, but we put some engineering with that and overlaid it with our current ORD program and a bunch of stuff. We mixed that all up to look at what we currently do and what they did back then, to look at an assessment. And the result is those farm ditches that cut into Nani's Creek overlap a lot of the ORD work that we currently do, minus a couple. And so I have the consultant currently doing a survey on a condition assessment on the entire county and out of the Southern Watershed CIP. And out of that, Nani's Creek is currently being surveyed into two phases. Between Mill Landing is the cutoff at the bridge. So we're going to come from the entrance to Nani's down to, in phase one, that survey will be complete in scope roughly next month. And so we'll do that first, 10,000 cubic yards or so, and then from Mill Landing out to Redhead Bay. So the thought process is that major arterial will be the first major dredging project to open up from the southern Beggars down through Nani's and out, then do a condition assessment over the whole basin in addition to the ORD work, and draw those farm ditches and all the other minor ditches in to Nani's. then look at Oakham and all the others, smaller lead, well, what you call lead ditches, but they're canal ditches, into the south and southwest, out to the east, that drain out into the bay. So that's the overall macroscopic big picture logic that we're currently working on. And so as far as the Southern Canal CIP, that 2.39 million a year is being dedicated and allocated, and it's all documented in the CIP budget. So if you want to read it, it's all in there. I documented the entire plan if you want to give it a read.
I'd like to see that.
You sure could. It's all in there.
Well, that
So-
3.9 million, of course, part of that is money for ARP. We supplemented from the ARP Agricultural Reserve Program, not the ARPA, but the ARP.
No. Yes, ma'am. If
We
you, if I
get a
misspoke.
million from that ARP every year with what we were putting in here. So the whole southern part of the city really depends on these lead ditches. So I'm really glad y'all are doing this assessment. Nanny's Creek area is really big, but of course those farm ditches can't go anyplace if we don't have these done. But once you do it and do it well, the way we just did Site 18, it's good for a lot of years.
Yes, ma'am. All of them are going to be worked the same way with the same type process. And so that whole condition assessment, the thought process was that we do non-east first. That'll get me through FY23, 24. My condition assessment will be done. Then I can take a look at the end of FY23, beginning of 24, and I can look at that condition assessment. And then I can take a look in FY24 dollars, take a look at the CIP and figure out where the additional needs are.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because I know what we did earlier, in 99, so basically was snag and drag, but they really didn't get the dredging done. So this is so important, and I really appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. And the ORD work will continue in one zone cycle to the north and one to the south. So you're still going to have production there, and we're going to do the major arterial. So you're still going to have production there. Site 11 work is still going to continue, and we're going to continue to do the condition assessment. So all that work, so you're still going to have all the Southern Canal work is going to be expended out of that CIP, plus the ORD work, in addition to the condition assessment.
Right, good.
So that was the thought process, and anyway.
That sounds
I
good.
hope that
Sounds
answers
like
your
we're on the
question.
right track. We'll keep working on it. Sounds good.
Yes, ma'am.
But on the first part, the whole thing with the water quality, just to make a comment on that part, we think all the time about quantity, getting the water off, and we forget that we have to also make sure that the quality is maintained, and y'all do a great job with that. Of course, we've got all these permits that we have to do and so forth to keep us on the right track, but that's so important because we lose sight of the quality aspect when we're so concerned about the quantity, but it's
And they
really
very
important.
much partner with each other.
Thank you
They're
very much,
intertwined.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
And then on this, the whole thing with operations and maintenance, this was such an important part of that referendum resolution that we promised the people, that we were going to get the maintenance done. And this couldn't be emphasized enough, because that's what people are wanting to know. When are you going to fix my ditch? And I think getting these cycles right is going to be important, so that we know, we've been hearing in past years, oh, it takes 25 years to do this, or 99 years to do the lakes, or whatever it is. We've really got to get those cycles right, and we need to know what we're telling the people, and that it's going to be right. So we have a ways to go yet, but that part of the referendum can't be forgotten, because we get bogged down on the 21 projects. We've got to remember the operations and maintenance. This is critical.
And
really
the direct,
appreciate
yes,
your
ma'am,
work.
and the director did tell me on Friday that he has a more detailed presentation planned for just ARPA in the spring.
Good, okay, thank
So
you.
you get more details then.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone else? Boy, are we having fun today. This is good stuff.
Oh, this is great. Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Any other questions?
Yeah, doing great. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Manager, thank you for your time. City Council, City Attorney's Office. Thank you.